Rupert Murdoch, who speaks regularly to Trump by telephone and is one of his most influential informal advisors, has urged the president to appoint either of the two free-market conservative finalists, Stanford economist John Taylor or former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh, according to two sources familiar with his outreach. A spokesman for Murdoch declined to comment. Trump didn't have amazing chemistry with Taylor, according to two sources familiar with their interactions. But he's still in the mix, possibly for vice chair. Top officials who Trump respects, including Vice President Pence, have been vouching for Taylor's credentials and intellect. Trump has also spoken favorably of current Fed Chair Janet Yellen, further muddling the picture. What else we're hearing? A source who spoke to Trump late last week said they left the conversation believing the president had not made up his mind. Another source close to the process told me the smart money is still on Powell. Powell's most aggressive advocate has been Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. But Trump should be taken at his word when he tells Fox Business' Maria Bartiromo that he's considering Taylor and Yellen, or a combination of Powell and Taylor for chair and vice chair. Some White House officials have vented about the constant stream of news stories promoting Powell's candidacy. They say they suspect the leaks have come from Treasury, since Powell is Mnuchin's preferred candidate. One senior official said Powell is far from a home run for Republicans. When Obama nominated Powell to the Fed board in 2012, 21 Republican senators voted against his confirmation. What the West Wing is reading: senior administration officials told me that Friday's Wall Street Journal editorial headlined "A Fed for a Growth Economy" was read attentively in the West Wing. The editorial argues it's a bad idea to give another term to the Obama appointee Janet Yellen or replace her with Jerome Powell, whom the journal portrays as a Yellen clone. The newspaper lobbies for Trump to appoint either Taylor or Warsh. Both would be change agents at the Fed, the editorial declares. Bottom line, if you're handicapping the Fed chair race, you're still probably safest with Powell. But this is far from a done deal. Trump still plans to announce his pick for the Fed chair before he leaves for Asia on November 3rd. Opting to keep taxing million-dollar earners at the current 39.6% rate will help stem the deficit increase from tax cuts for corporations and the middle class. Caveat: the million-dollar bracket plans haven't been finalized and could change this week, as committee Republicans finalize their tax bill during meetings on Tuesday and Wednesday. Potential blowback if the committee Republicans ultimately decide not to cut the income tax rate for million-dollar earners. Much of the Republican donor class and Reaganomics community, including anti-tax activist Grover Norquist, will feel betrayed. I understand compromise, but why compromise with the sin of envy? Norquist told us. This isn't the dumbest idea I have ever heard of. But it is in the top 20. Norquist argues this won't placate Democrats, who inevitably will charge that Trump's tax overhaul is just designed to help the rich but will alienate conservatives. Meanwhile, one administration official told me Trump doesn't really care about this issue. He basically thinks they rich people are fine, and he believes they don't care that much about the individual rate so long as they get all the other goodies, like the corporate rate and expensing, the official said. What's next? The House expects to pass the Senate budget this week. Shortly after, we're likely to have a timeline of when House Republicans will release their tax cut bill. A dynamic we're watching. House Republicans make no secret of their disdain for Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. They call him and Gary Cohn the Democrats. Don't expect either one of them to have much lobbying power with conservatives on the Hill over these next crucial weeks. Shrinking caliphate in Iraq and Syria. The Syrian Democratic Forces and the Iraqi Special Forces, with the help of the U.S. military, have retaken an area the size of California. Whites say that what ISIS still controls is a territory slightly smaller than New York State. Most importantly, White points out that ISIS has not regained an inch of the territory it has lost. Bottom line, the power of intimidation, to use Mattis' phrase, is working great. But now comes the hard part. What White calls the stabilization piece, working with Syrians and Iraqis on the ground to ensure ISIS doesn't make a comeback, is going to be incredibly tough and time-consuming work. Brett McGurk, the special presidential envoy for the global coalition to defeat ISIS, is responsible for ensuring the hard-fought military gains are maintained, ensuring the 73 coalition members NATO, Arab League, Interpol and EU continue to support these communities after the fighting stops. It's why Secretary Mattis and Tillerson work so closely together, White says, and why Mattis insists on having a State Department rep with him when he meets any of his counterparts. The reality: Pruitt is one of Trump's favorite cabinet secretaries, has aggressively deregulated his agency, and was a key voice behind the president's decision to withdraw from the Paris climate deal. But, don't mess with Grassley. Perhaps no senator wields more power over Trump than the Judiciary Committee chairman. When Grassley wants one of his people appointed at an agency, it happens. Trump views him as a loyal supporter who helped him in Iowa. Grassley even stuck by Trump after the Access Hollywood tape leaked. The fact that Grassley chairs the Judiciary Committee, which confirms federal judges, is just one more source of leverage. Go deeper on the policy and politics of ethanol with my colleague Amy Harder. In her column tomorrow morning, she'll dive into this hot issue, with an interview with Grassley. To read Harder's column, sign up for our energy newsletter Generate. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's party appeared to win a large majority in the Japanese general election on Sunday. That could allow him to amend Japan's constitution to remove any doubt about the military's legitimacy, according to the New York Times. Why it matters: Abe seems to have the two-thirds majority needed to change the constitution, which calls for the renunciation of war, but the public is split on the change, and Abe will need a majority of voters to make the amendments. The case for change with North Korea's hostility and missile tests growing, Abe focused on voters' fears in his campaign message, per the Times. Sen. Chuck Schumer requested on Sunday that Trump name a CEO of Response and Recovery to oversee recovery efforts, Reuters reports. Gov. Ricardo Rossello met with President Trump at the White House Thursday to discuss the ongoing recovery efforts on the island. Trump lauded the federal response in Puerto Rico, saying he gives the White House a 10-10 rating on its handling of the storm. Meanwhile, Rossello was less triumphant, acknowledging that while he appreciates the aid that has been sent to the island so far, we still need to do a lot for the people of Puerto Rico. It's not over by a long shot. Trump also stated that, at some point, FEMA has to leave, first responders have to leave, and the people have to take over. Celebrity chef Jose Andres launched a relief effort, Chef for Puerto Rico, through his nonprofit World Central Kitchen. Together, Andres, his team and hundreds of volunteers have served more meals on the island than the Red Cross. When we go to a place, we take care of that place until we feel it has the right conditions to sustain itself. That's what a relief organization should be, said Andres. The latest on what we know from Puerto Rico, per FEMA and the PR government site Boots on the Ground, more than 20,000 federal civilian personnel and military service members, including more than 1,700 FEMA personnel, are on the ground in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. State help: 31 U.S. states are helping in PR, and 20 in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Electricity: 20.22% of the island has electricity, down from 21.6% on Thursday. Roughly 53% of cell towers have been restored. Food: approximately 89% of grocery stores are open, 419 of 471, down from 90% Wednesday. Gas: roughly 79% of retail gas stations are operational, 873 of 1,100. Shelter: 4,154 people remain in shelters across the island, as of Sunday afternoon. 92 shelters are open and operating. Transportation: only 392 miles of Puerto Rico's 5,073 miles of roads are open. All commercial airports and federally maintained ports are open, some with restrictions. Water and waste: approximately 72% of Puerto Rico Aqueduct and Sewer Authority (PRASA) customers have potable water, 56% of wastewater treatment plants are working on generator power. Medical care: 97%, 6,567 of hospitals were open on Sunday. Less than half of those are operating with electricity. 95%, 4,648 of dialysis centers are open. Bank: 70% of bank branches, 221 of 314 are open and operating. This post is being updated with the latest information on the Puerto Rico recovery efforts. Mulvaney said the White House was agnostic about the idea of adding a tax rate for the super wealthy, later adding that they don't necessarily even want it. President Trump echoed those remarks on Fox News, indicating that the current plan is to keep the substantial cut for the wealthiest Americans that was in the initial plan. McConnell dodged, saying, "I hate to get into the details of this." Mulvaney said the plan to do so, which is a big sticking point because it means some people in high-tax states will actually see their federal taxes rise, would cause greater fairness and is something we really are hoping to change, and we hope the House and the Senate can accept that. McConnell didn't address this issue. McConnell was asked about Steve Bannon's declaration of political war against him and many Republican incumbents in 2018. He said, "Some of these folks that you've been quoting," note she only quoted Bannon, "are specialists in nominating people who lose. Senators Elizabeth Warren, Claire McCaskill, Heidi Heitkamp, and Mazie Hirono told their stories of sexual harassment on Meet the Press, joining the Me Too social media movement that arose after the many allegations against Harvey Weinstein came to light. Why it matters, as Chuck Todd said, the Harvey Weinstein story has brought to light the prevalence of sexual harassment and assault. Many of us, men mostly, were not aware or chose not to be aware of how common this kind of behavior apparently is. The Me Too movement's purposes shine a light on how many women, and men, have experienced situations like these. The other senators remarks. Sen. McCaskill, while working on getting a bill out of committee in the state legislature, was asked, "Did you bring your knee pads?" when she approached the Missouri Speaker of the House for advice. When Sen. Heitkamp was North Dakota Attorney General, she spoke out against domestic violence. At one event, a law enforcement official told her, "Listen here, men will always beat their wives, and you can't stop them." Sen. Hirono said, "I've been propositioned by teachers, by my colleagues, and, you name it. North Korea isn't just taking a cue from U.S. behavior with Iran. The regime is likely also considering what happened in the 90s after the North and the U.S. came to an agreement that ultimately collapsed Libya, and the demise of Muammar Gaddafi 8 years after he agreed to end the country's WMD program." Where things stand, Secretary Tillerson said last month that the U.S. has 3 channels of communication open to North Korea, but his spokesperson, Heather Nauert, was quick to clarify that North Korean officials have shown no indication that they are interested in or ready for talks regarding denuclearization. North Korea has said it will never give up its nuclear program, but the U.S. is demanding denuclearization. If the U.S. goes to the negotiating table with that demand on the table, the Pyongyang may never budge. Jim Walsh, who has been to Pyongyang to talk with officials about nuclear issues, tells Axios. For any negotiations to be successful, Walsh says, it's going to require that people enter talks without preconditions. His conclusion is that any agreement, if there is an agreement, would first include a freeze, with the hope that over time the deal would include a rollback in nuclear ambition. Although this apparent dilemma comes with one big caveat: the likelihood that North Korea comes to the negotiating table in the first place is low, with or without a breakdown in the Iran deal.